This is the end. We've covered a lot of ground together. We've talked about the algorithm that knows your loneliness and uses it against you. We've talked about doom scrolling and why it isn't a willpower problem, it's really a design problem. We've talked about the shame that scam victims carry in silence, the comparison trap, and the anxiety that makes people feel like they are somehow failing just for not keeping up. We've talked about grief and connection and the surprising ways that technology can protect our brain. All in 8 episodes, 8 conversations that almost nobody else in this space is having. And today, in the final episode of The Mind and the Machine, I want to bring it all together for you. Because there is a bigger picture here, a picture that goes beyond any individual person's experience with their smartphone. Today, I want to talk about what happens when entire groups of people, millions of older adults across North America and Europe, are either left out of the digital world entirely or pushed into it without any real support, guidance, or even protection. And I want to make the case that what is happening right now is not just a technology problem. It's a mental health crisis, and it is hiding in plain sight. I want you to imagine 2 people. The first person is 72 years old. She lives in a mid-sized city, maybe Toronto, maybe Birmingham, or maybe Minneapolis. She has a smartphone her daughter helped her set up. She uses Facebook, she video calls her grandchildren, and she gets her news online. She has access. But as we have explored throughout this entire series, that access comes with real cost. Algorithm-driven anxiety, comparison and loneliness, exposure to misinformation and scams, and the quiet erosion of confidence every time a new update makes something suddenly unfamiliar. Now, I want you to imagine the second person. Let's just say he's 78. He lives in a rural area, maybe Northern Ontario, maybe rural Scotland, or even a small town in the American Midwest. He doesn't own a smartphone. He has a basic phone that makes phone calls. That's it. He has no internet at home. Or the internet he does have is too slow to reliably load a web page. He cannot video call his grandchildren. He cannot access government services that have moved almost entirely online. He cannot book a medical appointment through the online portal his doctor just switched to. He cannot access the digital banking tools that his branch, which just closed, told him to use instead. He is digitally excluded, and the world is moving on without him. Now, here's the question that research forces us to answer. Which of these 2 people is in a better position? Because the honest answer is, we're not sure. And that tells you everything about where we are right now. Let's talk about what it means to be left out of the digital world in 2026. It's not just inconvenient. In the United Kingdom, researchers have documented that digital exclusion in older adults is directly correlated with increased rates of depression, reduced access to healthcare, greater social isolation, and a measurably lower quality of life. In Canada and the United States, the story is the same. Government services have migrated online. Banking has migrated online. Healthcare referrals, prescription refills, appointment booking, tax filing, all of it now assumes internet access. And for every older adult who cannot navigate those systems or just simply cannot afford the devices and data plans required, the message they receive from the world, whether anyone intends to send this or not, is this: you don't belong here anymore. That message, repeated day after day, service after service, door after door that cannot be opened, does real, measurable psychological damage. And research has classified the digital divide as a public health issue, not a tech issue, not a convenience issue, a public health issue. Because the data shows that being digitally excluded shortens lives. But here is the brutal irony that is at the heart of this crisis. Getting online doesn't automatically make things better. We have seen throughout this series entering the digital world without knowledge, skills, and protection can be just as harmful as being left out entirely. Older adults are the fastest growing demographic being targeted online by scams and scammers. They live for this. This is their job. In the United States alone, adults over 60 reported losing more than, get this number, $3.4 billion, that's with a B, dollars to internet fraud in a single recent year. And the experts believe that figure is a significant undercount because so many victims, paralyzed by the shame, never report what happened. In Canada and across Europe, the numbers tell the same story. And beyond financial fraud, we have the mental health costs we've discussed in detail, the anxiety, the comparison, the doom scrolling, the algorithmic dependency, the loneliness that social media can deepen rather than heal. So on one side of the divide, you have exclusion, depression, isolation, irrelevance. On the other side of the divide, you have inclusion, but inclusion into a system that was never designed with you in mind. And in the middle, between those two sides, stands millions of older adults with no guide, no advocate, and no map. This didn't happen overnight. The digital revolution moved faster than any social infrastructure could keep up with. Technology companies built products for young, tech-comfortable urban consumers. That was their customer. That was who they optimized for. Governments, especially in North America, were slow to recognize that digital access was becoming as essential as electricity or even running water. And in many parts of Europe, particularly in Scandinavia and Germany, there have been more robust policy responses, publicly funded digital literacy programs, accessibility mandates, and protections for analog service access so that people without internet aren't simply cut out. But those efforts are the exception, not the rule. In most of North America and in many parts of the UK, the prevailing attitude has been technology moves forward and individuals are responsible for keeping up. And that's terrible. And older adults who already face age discrimination, reduced incomes, and shrinking social networks are expected to navigate all of that largely alone. We should be ashamed. That is not a technology failure. That is a social failure. And I want to say something that I feel very strongly about. Digital access in 2026 is not a luxury. It is infrastructure. It is the road system, the telephone network, the postal service of our era. And when a large group of people, defined by age, are systematically excluded from that infrastructure or included in ways that harm them, that's a civil rights issue. I'm not being dramatic. When you cannot access your own medical records because the portal requires a smartphone you don't have, when you cannot vote easily because registration has moved online, when you cannot collect government benefits without navigating a website that assumes comfort with technology, you were never taught. Your full participation in society is being gatekept by a device. And age is the reason you're on the wrong side of that gate. Plain and simple. In 2026, that should be unacceptable. The disability rights movement fought for physical accessibility, ramps, elevators, accessible washrooms. They argued that the built environment had a responsibility to include everyone, and they were freaking right. The digital environment has the same responsibility, and right now, it's failing. I want to speak directly to anyone watching this who has an older parent, a grandparent, or a loved one navigating these challenges. So you're younger. I want to speak directly to you right now, because so much of what we have discussed in this series doesn't just affect the older adult. It affects everyone around them. When your parent is being targeted by scammers online, the financial and emotional fallout, it lands on the whole family. When your grandparent feels invisible and irrelevant because the world has gone digital and left them behind, that loneliness is something you witness and often feel helpless to fix. And you know what I'm talking about. When the anxiety and shame of not keeping up stops an older person from asking for help, that silence grows into distance. The mental health crisis of digital exclusion and unprotected digital inclusion is an intergenerational issue. We all have a responsibility. The most protective thing a family can do is talk about it openly, not with frustration, not with impatience, with the same compassion you would bring to any health conversation, because that is exactly what this is. I don't want this episode or this series to leave you feeling that technology is simply the enemy, because it isn't. We've covered in episode 6 that technology is genuinely linked to better health, better brain health, that is, in older adults, lower rates of cognitive impairment, more mental agility, greater independence. We talked in episode 7 about how digital tools have given grieving people new ways to process loss and find community. And I found that very powerful. And in episode 8, we looked at how active, intentional use of technology, not passive, algorithm-driven scrolling can meaningfully reduce loneliness and build real connection. Now, technology used on your terms with knowledge and awareness is genuinely powerful. It's very powerful. But the problem has never been technology itself. The problem is that millions of older adults have been handed extraordinary powerful tools with no instruction manual, no support system, and no one in their corner explaining the risks and the rewards honestly. That is the gap that exists, and that is the gap this channel exists to fill. So what does a real solution look like? At the individual level, it looks like you watching videos on like this one, building your knowledge, asking questions without shame, teaching others what you learn. At the family level, it looks like patience, sitting with an older person and walking them through the things that feel overwhelming. Not doing it for them, but doing it alongside them. And at the community level, it looks like libraries, community centers, places of worship, and local organizations making digital literacy support as normal and available as any other community health service. Programs like the Seniors eConnect program at the Toronto Public Library, those exist, and they need to be expanded, funded, and celebrated. In the UK and across Europe, there are brilliant grassroots organizations doing this work with almost no resources. They deserve support. And at the government level, it looks like legislation, accessibility mandates for digital services, funded digital literacy programs, protections for older adults from predatory algorithm design, legal requirements that analog alternatives remain available for essential services. And at the industry level, it looks like accountability. Technology companies need to be required to design with older adults in mind, not as an afterthought, but as a primary user group. Platforms that profit from algorithmically exploiting the loneliness of older adults need to face real consequences. None of this is radical. All of this is necessary. Now, I started Tech for Grownups because I believe that being left behind digitally isn't just inconvenient. It is a form of exclusion that affects every area of life. Your health, your finances, your relationships. and your sense of self. And I believed, and I still believe, that with the right information, the right guidance, and a community of people facing the same challenges together, things can change. This series, The Mind and the Machine, has been my attempt to go somewhere deeper. Because I don't just want you to know how to use your phone. I want you to understand what your phone is doing to you. I want you to be able to look at these tools with clear eyes, to use them intentionally, to protect yourself, to find real connection in them when they offer it, and to put them down without guilt when they don't. That is what tech literacy really means. It isn't just knowing how to click the buttons. It's knowing what's behind them. Now, we are at a turning point. The generation of people who built this world, who raised the families, built the institutions, fought the wars, and did the work, deserve to be full participants in the digital world their children and grandchildren inhabit, not as an afterthought, not out of charity, but as a right. And until the system, the governments, the companies catch up to that reality, this community, this channel is here to bridge that gap. If this series has meant something to you, I want you to do 3 things for me. First, leave a comment below and tell me which episode hit closest to home. Your experience matters, and it might be exactly what the next person down this road needs to read. Second, share the series, not just this video, but the entire playlist with someone who needs it. A parent, a neighbor, a friend who quietly struggles and doesn't understand why. This information should not live only in the corners of the internet where people have to search for it. It should be in the people's hands. Third, subscribe if you haven't already, because this series ends today, but this conversation is just getting started. The Mind and the Machine will return, and there is so much more to say. I can't stress that enough. Thank you, genuinely, for trusting me for 9 weeks with your time, for the comments, the stories, and the moments where you said, I thought I was the only one. You were never the only one. You were just waiting for someone to say it out loud. I'm Michael. This is Tech for Grown-Ups, and I will see you next week. Stay safe.